The definition of blind spot is the point of entry of the optic nerve on the retina insensitive to light. What's that have to do with math? Tune in. Welcome to the Speaking of Math podcast, episode number 77 by Door to Math. This podcast is devoted to all things math education and how parents can be a positive factor in their kids' math learning. Math is the gateway to many professional careers as well as confidence and personal growth. Find more information at www.doortomath.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Tucson Math Talk. So a few years back at a picnic, a mom came up to us and asked, okay, I have two young kids starting to enter first grade. By the time it's 8th grade, it might be too late. What are some things that I'm going to miss in 1st to 8th grade?
Yeah, we got asked that a lot in the neighborhood barbecue. So we actually took a piece of paper and wrote down 6 things that I, for the last 15, 20 years teaching math, that spotted as a pattern. So on the first list is our first blind spot item.
So the first item is adding on fingers.
All right, so when kids starting, you want to access all their sensories, the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. Adding on fingers is a good way to start, but that's not a good way to stop. Here's why. If you have a young girl, especially, if the child, she happened to really get used to adding on fingers somewhere along the way, 3rd, 4th grade, if she still does the same thing, chances are someone, boy, is going to laugh and make fun of her, and that would be detrimental to her self-confidence when it comes to math. And just like us as adults, kids don't want to do things that embarrass them. And in this case, however, math is not something you can stop working on, and the embarrassment doesn't go away.
Other than the embarrassment, does that hurt the child in other ways?
Yeah, what happens is when you're adding on the fingers, you're doing the counting. So you didn't really progress to what adding addition is all about. Without that progression, subtraction gets hard, and subtraction gets hard, then division gets hard, because division relies on multiplication table and subtraction.
Okay, quick corrective action.
Quick way, I would say add from the fingers early on, but get the facts down cold.
Facts. So, know it.
Yes.
All right. So, adding fingers. Next, doing multiplication up and down rather than sideways.
Yeah, this happens with lots of smart boys. Funny is that boys usually find shortcuts. They try to find a quicker way to get the homework done, right? And we can't blame them. I do that too. So what happens is when the kids who are doing a multiplication table in a column, they're actually adding faster and faster, but they're not really progressing to multiplication. Multiplication table is a faster way to add. But here's the thing. If you go 7 times 6 is 42, you get 42. It's because you know 6 times 6 is 36. Now, on the test, 7 times 6, you have to go all the way back to 2 times 6 is 12. And then you go 3 and then 4. It takes forever, right? The kid who is adding to get the multiplication done never progressed fast enough to actually have multiplication table be useful to them.
All right, corrective action.
A quick way, I would say there's notes on our podcast. There's a faster way to teach the multiplication. Just to summarize, there are 100 entries, 10 by 10 grid, right? Half of it is useless because multiplication has duplicate in that 5 times 7, 7 times 5 is the same, right? If you cut all half of it, then it's 50. Then the 1s and 10s are really easy, right? Then you're down to maybe 30 or so. So my point is that there's a faster way to teach. Don't rely on the memorization card.
Okay, so not memorization card. Do a faster, more efficient way to learn the multiplication table.
Yes, there's a lot of resources on YouTube online also, so check on that.
Okay, next, long division.
Yeah, long division is a tough one because it requires a couple of things that we don't like to do. Multiplication table, if you don't have that code, that gets difficult. And then subtraction. If you don't have subtraction with the borrowing in there, both of the things gets really, really uncomfortable for kids to do long division. long division leads to fraction and leads to percentage and decimal, so on and so forth. It happened to be one of this big milestone you cannot afford to skip.
Okay, corrective action.
Spend time when they're young really gets the arithmetic done.
No shortcut to it, just spend the time.
No shortcut, there's just no way around.
Okay, so you already mentioned percentage and fractions. What about percentage and fractions?
Percentage and fractions is the first time where we actually use, like if you buy a meal, right? There's tips, 10%, 15% tips, or if the service is really good, you want to give 20%. So this is actually the first time the arithmetic kids gets to apply it in real life.
All right, corrective action.
Do not shy away from it. Do not pull a tip card out and say, well, let's just look it up. Or worse yet, just go with what they recommend on the tickets. I remember going to Olive Gardens, they have suggestions, right? If you are in Olive Garden, figure out what 15%, how did it get there?
So practice, practice, practice.
Yes.
Okay, next one, bad grades in 7th and 8th grade and not earlier.
Yeah, so what I noticed from work is that grades are not a big deal in elementary school. Most parents say, yeah, the kids will catch up. Yes and no. The kids will catch up in one sense that math will progress. The kids who does not have a good work ethic or good homework habits do not tend to catch up. Actually, they're going to fall behind once math speed up.
All right, corrective action.
Yeah, two things really stands out is the messiness of the backpack. It sounds funny, but I believe the Chinese say how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So if you have this physical backpack, it's messy and get messier and kids start losing stuff, then they'll lose their concepts in their head. That's how they organize the thoughts at the same time. So messy backpack is something you really need to look out for.
Okay, so clean up their space, backpack and their desk maybe?
Their desk, it's not as important. The funny thing is, I think a backpack tells a lot more.
All right, messy backpack. Other messy backpack, bad grades. Is this when I need to go to see a professional?
I do think so. A bad grade is more like you have a cavity, right? So for a while, the teeth was not brushed right or flossed right. By the time you do get cavity, you really have to take action as soon as possible. I mean, it's kind of like this. There's a little we can change until we really notice how we failing to notice small things, right? Our consciousness and what we can do is really limited by what we actually notice. It's kind of like what we think and what we do is really limited by what we did or did not notice.
And these are some of the things that you've observed that parents over the years don't tend to notice.
Right. So, that's what we're talking about, the fast forward button. If a kid at first grade insists on adding by hands and that was not really progressed to the next level, then you fast forward, then chances are division is going to be hard, long division, right? If the division is hard, the chances are the percentage and fraction is going to be hard. And when the things are hard, kids don't want to take care of that. The backpack gets messy. That's how they organize the information in their head. And physically, it manifested in how they kept up with the backpack. By the time when they get 7th, 8th grade, grades will fall.
All right, so I think you just did a really good summary. So first grade, mom comes up and says, what are some of the things I'm going to miss in the 8th grade unless I know ahead of time? And these are the big 5. Adding on fingers, doing a multiplication table up and down, long division, then percentage and fraction, then bad grades in the 7th and 8th grade. All right. And
messy backpack.
and messy backpack
right.
As part of the bad grades. And on that note, until next time.
Happy parenting.